Hi, welcome to the bathtub. And so Lucky, come here. When you want to say hi? Come here. All right. Lucky wants to say hi. I have to let her say hi when she wants to say hi, which is very rare. But when she hears the beeping go off, she wants to come say hello. And also, you want to stay here? You can stay here for a bit. Oh, what a good dog, the puppy noir. All right, this is a sound effect for this episode. And when you see this device, is it doing anything? It's doing something. And it's Lucky wants to go because I think it scares her. I'm going to put it down here. It's going to be telling me my temperature in a minute. This is the pre-COVID edition of the bathtub. And we're just testing to see what my temperature is. See if I've got the COVID. It says I've got 98. So I'm at 98. I'm supposed to be okay. It also gives me my... It says finger out. Get your finger out of there. I work at a weird shop a couple days a week, and the people there got all COVID. So I don't know. I don't have it yet, but I'm taking my temperature all the time just so I don't give it to you guys. I don't want to give you guys this damn COVID. Anyway, we're going to do 2 or 3 of these episodes pretty quickly, partly because I've fallen behind, so it's a catch-up edition, and partly because if I get COVID, I probably won't be my beautiful self. And I won't get any more beautiful over the years. And I'm gonna let Dodo out now. She's gonna come out. Lucky's done her. Lucky did her bit. And we're gonna do a couple of really rambling episodes as usual. But I want to do 2 or 3 at once. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is one of probably my favorite bathing bathtub read. My favorite bathtub author. I was thinking about this when I was going back to reread him. And it sounds a little pretentious, but it's Gustave Flaubert. I know that really sounds pretentious, but I love Flaubert. And I love him more as I get older. I mean, I put him up there with Chekhov as far as my favorite writers, but even just for the beauty of the sentences and the paragraphs, I just love him. And so I started off, I'm going to do a complete read-through of Flaubert. It's another one of those endless tasks we like to assign ourselves here. Since we're not in college anymore, we like to give ourselves tasks. And I'm going back and either reading stuff I never read before, and I have never read Three Tales, and then rereading a lot of other stuff, as well as a biography. I've read parts of this book in the past, and I wanted to get down and finally get back to it and finish it. So I started it over again. Geoffrey Wall's biography of Flaubert, which came out about 2001. Geoffrey Wall is one of the many translators of Flaubert, and I think he's translated many of the books and stories in the past, especially in the past 20, 30 years. And he writes beautifully. I think he's one of the most beautiful prose writers in biography writing, and he's kind of the perfect man to write about Flaubert. So I just restarted. I've read his essays in the past. He introduces many of his Penguin translations, such as the Selected Letters, and I'm really enjoying reading this. Mainly, I want to get through the whole thing. Anyway, I never read Flaubert's Three Tales, which is kind of dumb. And I don't know why. I never thought of it as a major important Flaubert book for no reason. I have no idea except that it's short. And it was short stories, and I never thought of Flaubert as a short story writer. But I just, as a start to my rereading through Flaubert, I wanted to read what I haven't read of his. And so I read this over about two or three bathtubs. And it is the first 2 stories are 2 of the best things he ever wrote. And it turns out, according to the introduction here by Robert Baldick, I believe everything they tell me in the introductions to Penguin books, which is a flaw in my character. But he says that this was actually Flaubert's was probably his most successful book, which I had no idea. It was the last thing he published that he had finished by himself. And it's 3 short stories. As usual, he would spend years writing these damn things. Le mot juste, the right word was his thing. He always tried to choose the right word, which for us people reading in English, probably we don't recognize it. But you can just read from every single sentence and every observation and every paragraph. And he really does wonderful the passage of time. Flaubert just moves through stories. One paragraph to another can cover several years in one of his characters' lives. And anyway, this was it's a great book. It's wonderful. It was famous and successful in its time for a story, a long story here called A Simple Heart, about a woman. Is her name Félicité? She's basically a really poor woman who spends her life in service to an old woman who loses her husband fairly early in her life. And Félicité spends her whole life devoted to taking care of this old woman. And she's always, it is incredibly beautiful and sad. Flaubert can tell really beautifully written, affectionate stories about people who are kind of pathetic. Just pathetic and sad, and yet bring incredible beauty to their lives. I mean, most of you know Madame Bovary, a book which I've tried teaching many times over the years, and it always depressed me because my students never got Madame Bovary. Almost none of my students ever liked Madame Bovary, which was really, really surprising to me. But you have a character who's actually kind of awful. She's dishonest. She treats her husband terribly. She has a lovely husband. She treats him awful. She's totally selfish. She just wants to spend all her money on nice clothes. But you feel for Madame Bovary, and you really like her all through the book. And as Flaubert once said, I am Madame Bovary, c'est moi. I am Madame Bovary. You feel that in everything Flaubert writes, that he feels for these characters and is in their hearts, not just their heads. He's in their hearts, and he sees the world through their eyes. And he's also incredibly funny and bitter about them. And I don't think I've ever seen it more stark than in this wonderful story about this woman who has almost nothing in her life. Everybody she cares about. She has the woman she takes care of has a son and a daughter. I'm going to tell you the plot, so I don't think you need to. There's no spoiler alert necessary, because you can read the story even when you know what's going to happen. Both these children die. And it just breaks this woman's heart. And then she has a nephew who she loves. I forget if he dies or he disappears. I think he does die. Then she has a parrot, which she inherits from somebody. I forget who it is. You just think about it. That's why I want to let Dodo out. She inherits this old parrot who's just wandering around the house all the time. And when he dies, it just breaks your heart. And she has this parrot stuffed. It's just basically one kind of horrible thing after another that happens to this woman who's looking for something to love. And she goes to church. A little bit like Brian Moore's Judith Hearn. She goes to church and Catholic services hoping to be loved back, and never gets it back. Anyway, I'm just going to read a small passage from this wonderful story. This book is worth getting just for that story, A Simple Heart. And maybe I lost it already. This is terrible. It's about when she gets her. When her parrot dies, she sends him off to get him stuffed, because she has nothing in her life except this parrot. So she has it stuffed, and she brings it. So it's both funny in the darkest comic way, and incredibly moving. And this is the little description of her room and what it looks like when she lives in this house. I think the old woman dies, and she leaves. She doesn't leave the house to Félicité. She just stays on in the house, and nobody wants to buy it because it's probably just a complete wreck. Anyway, she shuts up this parrot in her room, and this is how he describes her room. This place, to which few people were ever admitted, contained such a quantity of religious bric-a-brac and miscellaneous oddments that it looked like a cross between a chapel and a bazaar. Just like a sale place or a church. A big wardrobe prevented the door from opening properly. Opposite the window that overlooked the garden was a little round one looking onto the courtyard. There was a table beside the bed with a water jug, a couple of combs, and a block of blue soap in a chipped plate. He doesn't overly describe things, but he just gives you just enough of an image you can picture it for yourself. On the walls there were rosaries, medals, several pictures of the Virgin, and a holy water stoup made out of a coconut. On the chest of drawers, which was draped with a cloth just like an altar, was the shell box Victor had given her. I think that's her nephew or her son, or the old woman's son. I can't remember. And also a watering can and a ball, some copybooks, the illustrated geography book, and a pair of ankle boots. And on the nail supporting the looking glass, fastened by its ribbons, hung the plush little hat. Félicité carried this form of veneration to such lengths that she even kept one of Monsieur's frock coats. This is the man who I think that was the husband of the woman who died, and she's kept this, has almost like this little altar to this dead man. And Victor is the boy. I think he's the nephew who she knows him through her sister, as I recall, and she takes him to church every week. And this is her whole week is to dress this little boy up and take him to church. And when he grows up and goes away, it's just heartbreaking. Anyway, beautiful story. Takes her straight through to her death, like Madame Bovary. His father was a doctor, and he can just sort of take you through the horrors of dying from both watching it and being that person. A great story, and I will read it again. The second story, I'd heard about it, and I've never read it. It's called The Legend of Saint Julian Hospitaller. And I was looking for, just before I did this talk, I was trying to find if it seems like it was based on a real myth or a real legend. But according to the introduction here and to something else I looked at, it was based on a stained glass window in a church at I can't say it, Rouen Cathedral, stained glass window. And he took that picture and he created this legend. It is another incredibly powerful story. And it reminds me a little bit about his great romance historical fantasy, Salammbô. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, which is one of the most powerful and visually beautiful and horrifying. And there are some scenes, the most horrifying scenes I've ever read, and they're just beautifully written. This is about I did see someone online said that this guy, Saint Julian the Hospitaller, was the patron saint of serial killers. I don't think serial killers have patron saints. I don't know what they meant. But it's about a kid who grows up from really wealthy families. I forget if they're kings and queens or not. And from a very young age, he loves to kill things. And it starts off, again, with just a few descriptions of him killing things. A mouse, maybe, and I don't know, something else. And bugs. And then he goes off hunting. Because he's a wealthy kid. He's got all the bow and arrows and all this stuff. And he goes off hunting. And eventually his love for killing things gets over. Every time he kills something, he gets more excited and more excited. And there's a scene about halfway through the story in which he goes out in the woods and just slaughters animals. And I know you'd think this turns your stomach. It does in a way, but it's also so kind of beautifully rendered. And at the same time he's doing these horrible things, he's realizing it's horrible way back in his head. And eventually a stag comes up. He kills a mother, a doe, and her child, and then the father comes, the stag comes, and he hits it right between the eye with an arrow, as I recall. And the stag walks over to him with his arrow sticking out, and he curses the boy, and he says, "You will kill your parents as a result of being such an evil kid." And the kid totally feels guilty. For the first time in his life, he feels guilty. I don't want to tell the rest of the story. I've never read anything like it. It's a beautiful fantasy horror story, and it's such a great shift in a way from the kind of horrible terrors and the beautiful horrors of A Simple Heart to these horrible beauties of Saint Julian the Hospitaller. And then finally, the third story is good. It's well written. It's beautiful. It's called Herodias, and it's about the Salome killing or giving this dance so that her mother, I think it is, Herodias, kills St. John the Baptist. I'm not that familiar with the Salome story, but it was well written and beautifully done, and it just didn't hit me like the other ones did. And it kind of made a lot of references to some biblical passages. I don't follow the Bible I don't follow it at all. Anyway, very quick, wanted to say this quickly, get this out there. Start reading Flaubert if you haven't read it before. In Classical Glass, it's a Classical Glass episode. It's a hell yeah. You can't do better than Flaubert. They just don't come better than him. And if you're looking for a biography, I'm going to read a few of his biographies over the next few months because I want to do something about him. And I love Jeffrey Wall's translations, and I love his biography, and I like his introductions. He writes beautifully. He writes really beautifully. Happy bathing. And hold on a second, let me check. I'm going to go out with this, okay? Take care. Bye. It's an oximeter. Okay, I'll turn this off. Happy bathing. Where's what?